everybody. Hey, welcome to Prairie Lakes Church. My name is Eric Duncan, and I'm the college pastor here at our Cedar Falls campus of the River, our college ministry. And so speaking of college ministry and college students, this is just the second weekend that college students in the Cedar Valley are back. So we just want to welcome you. Let's give a round of applause for all of our college students here with us today. Glad that you're here. If you've never checked out the River, our college ministry, the ministry that's my privilege to lead and to shepherd, I would encourage you, check that out tonight. We're kicking off tonight. We meet every Sunday night here at the church. Come out to that 5:30 p.m. free, delicious meal that we're going to have together, and then we're kicking off worship and a new teaching series tonight at 6:10. The River is really geared towards the issues and the challenges that college students are dealing with, and so come join us for that. We'd love to have you, okay? That's my little college student plug there. And then as always, we know that as a Prairie Lakes Church body, we are worshiping together not only here in this room in Cedar Falls, but also with other church locations all across the state of Iowa. We have 6 locations now all over Iowa, and so they're all worshiping with us this morning, as well as everyone who's worshiping with us online. So let's welcome all of them in. So glad that you're here. Thanks for being with us. Awesome. Hey, we know at the beginning of our teaching time, we always grab 2 things, Bible and something to take notes on, right? Bible, something to take notes on. I'll give you a second now, just kind of shuffle, grab those things out. If you didn't bring a Bible with you, totally all right. You can use a smartphone, tablet, whatever works well for you. Just kind of nudge somebody next to you. There's Bibles underneath a number of the seats in front of you. You can grab that. Back of your bulletin, great spot to take notes. Back of your bulletin, there's a blank spot to take notes. If you need a pen for taking notes, just raise your hand nice and high if you need a pen for taking notes. We'll have ushers. They'll get to you here in the next couple minutes, and we'll get you a pen. Okay, we just place a really high value on the Word of God here and on having the Bible in front of you. We believe it's authoritative, it's trustworthy for our lives, and really when preaching happens on the weekend here, we think that it's not so much like even the pastor that's preaching and his words that we want you to hear. We want you to hear from God through the words of the Bible, and so it's just really important that you follow along with us, take notes along the way. Okay, so I'll let you grab those things. We are in the second week, as Gabe alluded to, of a teaching series that we're doing called Tunnel Vision. Tunnel Vision. Pastor John kicked us off last week, and what this series is doing is we're looking together at a few focuses, a few emphases that here in this next season together as a church, we just want to focus in on with laser focus, and we just want to get after these few things. And so as we get to our topic of discipleship for this week, let me just remind us kind of where we are as a church community. So we believe that God has given us as a church community this vision, okay, this vision together to make it impossible to get to hell from the state of Iowa. We don't want anybody in the state of Iowa to be able to get to hell because we've done such all the job that we can really of getting Jesus proclaiming, Jesus focused churches all over our state. So that's our vision and our strategy to make that happen. First and foremost, okay, first of all, how about the screen, huh? Screen, right? Come on, it's pretty cool. Thank you. I like the round of applause for the screen. Yay, screen. It's awesome. Yeah, so Pastor John's just got a whiteboard. Okay, don't tell him. Don't tell him. I've got a screen. Okay, all right, enough about the screen. It's pretty cool. Our tech guys are awesome. So we're launching campuses, right? This is our strategy to make it impossible to get to hell. We want to launch campuses all over the state of Iowa, churches that are focused on Jesus so that people can meet him and walk with him. But not only that, we also want to launch disciples, that is individual and groups of followers of Jesus into Little Iowa. And by Little Iowa, we just use that to refer to like your own sphere of influence, the place where you live, your neighborhood, your workplace, your kids' sports team, your gym, all that kind of thing, your Little Iowa. We need to launch disciples there. Now, why is this second part of this strategy so important? Why is that so crucial for us? Here's what we know about Iowa, okay? If we put a church location in some town in Iowa, there's a good chance that a good number of people will come, that they might check it out, okay? Because they're curious about Jesus or they want to try something new, whatever it might be. But we also know there's a whole lot of people in Iowa that will never even dare to darken the front door of a church. They just wouldn't dare, right? Because maybe they've just been so offended. Maybe they've been wounded by the church at some point in time. Maybe they just have a really negative view of like church people, or maybe even of Jesus to some extent, or the Bible. Maybe they've been hurt at some point in the past. Maybe they're just indifferent, apathetic. Like they just don't care. They're just not interested, right? Those people, they're never even going to necessarily come, at least not right away, to a church location. And so the question then becomes, how are those people going to know about Jesus? How are they going to learn about Jesus? And what we need to realize together is that the main way the people in that situation are going to learn about Jesus, the main picture that they are going to have of Jesus is not going to come from the Bible. The main picture of Jesus is not going to come from a church. It's not going to come from a pastor. Their main picture of Jesus is going to come from you. From you, right? You may be the only Jesus that person ever has the opportunity to know. And that is the reason that it is crucial. It's just crucial that we as a church community get after not only launching campuses on like a corporate big level, but launching disciples, equipping all of you to follow Jesus everywhere that you are in your little Iowa, and being equipped to help others to do the same so that somebody can take steps towards God. Eventually, yes, we want them to be a part of a church community, but for some, that'll come later. And you will be the first step with them. So we need to launch disciples into Little Iowa. And so this then is what we are focusing in on today, is this idea of discipleship. Discipleship. Now, certainly I know that when I say a word like discipleship, it's one that is really just, it's a church word, right? That's a word that kind of Christians use, and it's a word that we don't really use in very many circles outside of the church world. Maybe you've even been around church for a while, and nonetheless, that term is like not really familiar to you. Basically, when we say discipleship, we're just referring to this idea that when you cross over the faith line, right? We talk about the faith line, and this idea that we place our faith in Jesus and Him alone for salvation, and kind of just give up ourselves and cling to Him. When you cross over the faith line, like, you're not done. You're not done then. Actually, things are just beginning. And what happens at that point is that you continue on this journey of discipleship, and you begin to grow further with God. And that's discipleship. It's just growing more and more in your walk with God. And it's helping others. Making disciples is helping others to do the same. That's just kind of generally what we mean by that. Really, we're going to spend the rest of today trying to continue to clarify what we mean by discipleship. Now, as soon as I begin to talk about you sort of helping to disciple others, or you sort of helping other people to move along in their walk with God, a number of us might have some sort of awkward associations or experiences come to mind. Maybe you were a person who got some training on how to share your faith with others. Maybe you kind of learned like an illustration you could show somebody, kind of went through the basics of the faith, or like a script, like a series of questions that you would walk through. One that I've heard before is kind of this idea of you go to somebody and you ask them, if you were to die tomorrow, do you know what would happen to you? Do you know what would happen? And the idea is that they would say, well, no, like I'm not sure. And so then you'd have the opportunity to share Jesus with them, right? And that's the theory. Like that's how it's supposed to go, right? But how do those conversations actually go? Well, you walk up to somebody and you've like got your script there, and you're like, okay, if you were to die tomorrow, do you know what would happen to you? And you're talking to a gal, and she responds, oh yeah, I know exactly what would happen to me. I would wake up the next moment as a lioness in the Sahara of Africa because I believe in reincarnation. And you're just like, that's cool, but that's not in my script, I don't know what to do with that, right? And all of a sudden, it dawns on you very quickly, there's no script for this stuff. There's just really not. There are so many factors that are outside of our control as we try to talk with people and walk alongside of them to take steps towards Jesus. We just have so little control in that situation. Or I think of an example from my life and experience where I was just beginning to disciple guys, and it was one of the guys that I was first just beginning to meet with, and I'd set up a time to grab coffee with him one morning, and I had picked out a text for us, and I had written down questions, and I had worked through it, and I'd underlined stuff, and these questions were really relevant and quality, and I was just all ready to go, just to have a good conversation with this guy. And he walks in the door, and he comes over, and he sits down, and we start talking, and just right away in the conversation, he says, yeah, My girlfriend broke up with me yesterday, and you could tell he was just like really down about it. Like you could see like even like tears were like about to be coming, and I'm just sitting there thinking, oh man, like that's such a bummer, but like couldn't she have dumped you like tomorrow, because like I've got this great lesson right here, and I worked really hard on this, I want to go over this. Like, can we just do that, but I can't, right? Okay, sensitivity is not my strong suit. Okay, all right. I didn't actually say that to him. I was just thinking it. All right. Stop judging me, okay? So, but all right, so that's the idea. There's just no script, and we get thrown off sometimes if we try to have the script. Some of us have had these kinds of experiences. Maybe you're a person who's been on the receiving end of somebody trying to kind of share Jesus with you, and it was just kind of like the awkward, creepy Christian moment thing, like, as they kind of stumbled through it, to which I would just want to say, like, I'm sorry. Thanks for giving us a second chance. Like, I don't know what else to say other than that. So there you go. Sorry about that. And for many of us who are followers of Jesus, we can relate to this experience where we're talking with somebody and all of a sudden the conversation begins to turn and we realize things are getting to be spiritual in nature and talking about God or faith in the Bible, and our palms get kind of sweaty, our heart rate starts to increase, get a little nervous. Am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to mess this up? And we worry about this. Man, discipling people is difficult. It's just a really difficult thing to do. It's hard. But as we talked about in our strategy and our vision to reach Iowa, it's also really important. So there's just like these two basic things I think we can all just kind of agree on with discipleship. It's really difficult and it's really important, And so for us, as a church community, if we want to get after discipleship here, if we want to get after living out how Jesus would in our little Iowa and helping others in our little Iowa to take steps with him, then we've got to get clarity together. We've got to get clear on what is discipleship and how do we do it. And we've got to have some sort of a method for discipleship that all of us feel like we can get on board with and be a part of. So that's what we're going to look at together today. Just a couple things with discipleship. I think that if we can get clear together on just two things, our motivation for discipleship and our method for discipleship, our motivation and our method. If we can get clear on those two things, I think we're going to be well on our way to a much better place when it comes to discipleship. So in order to explore this motivation and this method for discipleship, turn with me to Matthew chapter 28, 18 through 20. I'll give you a minute to turn there. Got your Bible, Matthew 28, 18 through 20. So Matthew, it's the first book in the New Testament. Should be relatively easy to find for you there. First book, New Testament. And we're in chapter 28, which is going to be all the way to the end of the book of Matthew. So it's right before Mark. Okay? So we're going to be there. Gospel of Matthew, written by one of Jesus' disciples. His name was Matthew. And so this book just kind of lays out all of Jesus' life, his ministry, the way that he loved and served others, the way that he performed miraculous signs. And then as we get to the end of the book, Jesus has already died. He's risen from the dead. And where we are jumping in, Jesus is now about to ascend back to God, back to heaven, to be with God. And so just before he ascends, though, he leaves his disciples with these pretty well-known, pretty famous words, especially if you're kind of familiar with this talk around discipleship. This passage, we often refer to it as the Great Commission. The Great Commission, Jesus' command to go and to make disciples. So let's read this together. I think we can see some new insights from this passage here today. So I'll begin reading in verse 18. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." Okay, so that's our passage here. And I want us to look at a couple things together. First, go back and look at verse 18 for a moment, where Jesus says that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to him. It's interesting when we talk about the Great Commission, oftentimes people just jump in, or maybe like if you memorized this verse as a child, you probably started at verse 19. Like most people, we begin with the therefore go and make disciples, with the command. And we often ignore verse 18. But in fact, because of the therefore at the beginning of 19, we know that the only reason that we can go and make disciples, the only basis, the only foundation, the only motivation that we can have to go and make disciples must come somewhere in verse 18, right? Because there's this therefore, like in light of what's in verse 18, now go and make disciples. So then that should make us ask, okay, well, what's so important in verse 18 then? What's the basis? What's the foundation of this command to go and make disciples? And the answer is that it's this authority. That Jesus says that all authority in heaven and earth has been given to him. Now, why is Jesus' authority so important when it comes to our motivation for making disciples? As I interact with people and talk to them about beginning to invest in others or help others, mentor others, the main objection, the main pushback that I most consistently hear is basically, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to lead that Bible study. I'm not ready to lead that small group. I'm not ready to lead that class. I'm not ready to mentor somebody. I can't lead those children, that children's group. I'm not ready for that. I'm not able. I'm not adequate. I'm not equipped to do that. I hear that a lot from people. Basically, what those people are saying is, I don't have the authority. I don't have the authority to do that. I'm not good enough. I'm not powerful enough. I'm not ready to do that. I don't have the authority. Okay, here's something that we need to understand from this passage. To anyone who would kind of say, I don't have the authority to help others grow in their faith, okay? You are exactly correct, right? You're exactly right. Like you have no authority, none, like not at all to help others. And in fact, if this task of making disciples of all nations was up to you, like, heaven forbid, right? Like things would be a disaster. And if it was up to me as well, right? Because we're a mess, and our palms get sweaty and we get nervous and like we screw things up, and there's no script and it throws us off and we don't know what to do, okay? And that's just kind of who we are. And one of the things that the writer Matthew, and really all of the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are really intent on showing us throughout all four gospel books is that the disciples, like the people that follow Jesus, his early followers, they're kind of just a bunch of babbling morons. They kind of just are. Like they're fumbling over themselves all of the time. They don't understand Jesus. They don't really see what he's up to. They don't get it, And yet then, at the end of the Gospels, Jesus is raised from the dead, and he gives this command to them to go and make disciples. And then you turn to the book of Acts, which is like after the resurrection, kind of the early disciples' movement of the church. It's like a switch flipped. And all of a sudden, something changes in the disciples. Something deep changes. And it's this thing that occurred when Jesus rose from the dead. It's like something in like the cosmos, something powerful changed. Which is that when Jesus rose from the dead, he took up authority. He was given all authority in heaven and in earth. And when Jesus rose from the dead, he began a movement that like a wave roaring through the ocean, so also the Spirit of Jesus after the resurrection begins to move with a rapid pace in and through the lives of individual people, and not only people, but also cultures and societies and institutions. And it is this movement of disciple making that began by the Spirit of Jesus. It began when he rose from the dead, and it will not end until he returns. And friends, the movement of Jesus in the world is not going to be stopped by your inadequacy. It's not going to be stopped by your inadequacy. No. And friends, what this means is that any time that we go to try to make disciples or have a spiritual conversation or help somebody grow in their faith in some way, we can know in that moment that the reason that we're able to do that is not because of our ability, but because of Jesus' authority, because of what he is doing. Here's kind of the big idea here is that we make disciples by the authority of Jesus and not by our own abilities. by his authority, by what he's done. He has begun this movement. His Spirit is at work. And so if anything good happens, if anybody takes any steps, it's not because like you were so clever, because you just said something in such a smart, wise way. No, it's because the Spirit of Jesus is working in and through people. It's his authority that he's taken up. And it's that authority then that he passes on to his disciples and says, now you go. And one of the things that we need to understand as a church together is that every single follower of Jesus has been given this authority, delegated this authority from him to go into your little Iowa, into your workplaces, into your families, into your neighborhoods, into your church communities, and to make disciples there, not because you're clever, but because Jesus has taken up authority, because he started a movement. And so we're just hopping on board. We're hopping on board with what Jesus is doing. And so the pressure's off, you guys. The pressure's off of you and you having to come up with all the right things to help somebody to grow. Being a pastor over the years and in conversation with other pastors, something that I've just heard and seen really consistently is this idea that on weeks when the pastor kind of says, man, like my sermon this week, my message, I've got it down. My prep has been really good this week. I just feel really clear on this passage. I've got some great one-liners in this message, man. Just like tweet that thing. It's going to go viral. It's just gonna be so good, right? And they're just ready. And they deliver that message. And then like the response from their people afterward and in conversation is just kind of like, it's like crickets. There just doesn't really seem to be much that happens from that. And yet then like another time when the pastor just feels like, man, I just like barely squeaked out that sermon, like it was just tough. Like my prep was difficult. I never really felt like I got clarity on the passage. I just kind of struggled through it. I didn't feel like my words were clear and all that kind of thing, right? And then like in conversations afterwards with their congregation, like people just respond and they're just like, oh my gosh, like God spoke to me so powerfully today, and just like, how do you explain that? Well, the authority of Jesus. Right? It's the authority of Jesus. It's not about our ability. It's not about us. It's about him. He's the one that works in and through people. And so guys, the pressure's off. We can just rest in him and in his authority as we seek to make disciples. But what does he say then though? Therefore go. Therefore go. Yeah, you know what? Yep. You've got to go though, right? His authority, his power, his ability, and yet you now go. You're not off the hook. You've got to go take initiative and get out there and make disciples and do some work and write up a lesson plan that gets scrapped 2 minutes later, but okay, right? Like you've got to do that and get after it. So we've still got to talk not only about our motivation, which is the authority of Jesus, but also about our method. Our method. How then do we go about this idea of making disciples? Now, as we get into talking about a method for discipleship, before we get to the right way, which Jesus gives us a pretty clear picture in Matthew 28 of a right method or right view of discipleship, I want to talk about some wrong ways. Some ways we confuse discipleship, that we kind of minimize it or reduce it. We get it sort of wrong in the church, okay? So we're going to look at three ways we get discipleship wrong, and then we'll look at sort of the right way that we can do this together. So here's our first way that we often wrongly think of discipleship. Think of it as it's knowing the Bible. Yeah, that's discipleship. It's just knowing more Bible. Basically what we do is that we take Matthew 28, verse 19 and 20, and we think that all that Jesus said there was, therefore go and make disciples, teaching them everything I've commanded you. But if you look at the passage, right, look at verse 20 with me. He doesn't say teaching them everything I've commanded you. What does he say? Teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. To obey, right? But we make the Christian life, it's just like a knowledge thing. All of Christianity is just like an intellectual exercise. It's nothing more than that. And the great evil of, kind of this mindset then of Christianity, if it's just about knowing the Bible, the great evil is just, it's being wrong. It's being wrong. It's not about disobedience, it's just being wrong. But man, Christianity isn't just about knowing the Bible. It's about obeying the Bible, Pastor John often says, maybe you heard him say this, that he refuses to be a part of a fat, dumb, and happy church. Right? You guys heard him say that, right? I just refuse to be a part of a fat, dumb, and happy church. Well, my concern far more would be that we'd be a fat, smart, and happy church. Fat, smart, and happy church. We know the Bible, know it inside and out. But don't do it. Don't necessarily do what it tells us to do. Oh yeah, I know the Bible. Yeah, what's the greatest commandment? Oh yeah, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. Love that verse, got it memorized. Oh yeah, how's your neighbor doing? How's your neighbor doing? You know what are you praying for them? What are they struggling with? What's going on? Oh, I don't know. Oh yeah, book of James. I love the book of James, man. I study that multiple times. I got the book memorized. It's such a great book. And there's that one verse that says, oh, this is true religion, caring for the widow and the orphan. Study the book of James a bunch of times. Yeah, how are the widows in your life? How are the orphans doing? You got any caring for those at all? Oh, right? This is what we do. We just make it about knowledge. It's not just about knowing the Bible, though. It's about obeying the Bible. And that is a crucial thing that we've got to get clear on. We wrongly think of it just as knowing the Bible. It's teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. Another thing, we often think that the Christian life is it's attending church. It's just attending church. That's discipleship, It's all that it is. And we turn a faith that is supposed to be a 24/7 faith, and we turn it instead into a 1-1 faith. 1-1. I think we could make a bumper sticker out of that. 1-1 faith. I follow Jesus, 1 hour a day, 1 day a week when I go to church. That's my faith, Or some of you, it's 3-4, 3 hours, 4 days a week because you come to the potluck, or you help out the children's ministry or whatever, right? But it's just the idea, my faith, that's when I go to church. That's the Christian life. No, it doesn't say go and make disciples and teach them to attend church events. That's not what it says. No, go and teach them to obey everything that I have commanded you. Here's the last way that I think we wrongly get discipleship. Some of us, and this is probably more the younger generation, is more prone to this one. It's this idea of, discipleship or the Christian life is just getting a spiritual high. That's kind of what it is. Maybe the older generation would be more prone to kind of the first two, younger generation, kind of this idea of getting a spiritual high. Church, I go on Sundays, right? It's just this powerful emotional experience. And I just need to get up. I just need to get high on Jesus, and have this experience. And then throughout the week, I get to Monday, Tuesday, I'm just kind of leaking, and I'm getting kind of weaker and weaker and discouraged, and maybe there's some midweek experience. You hear a podcast or whatever, worship song, and you get up again, but then it's, and then you get to Sunday and you're back up, right? It's just this roller coaster. That's not the Christian life either. That's not all that discipleship is. Now, what does Jesus say in our verse, in Matthew 28, verse 20, that discipleship is? It's teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. To obey everything I have commanded you. Here is a proper way to understand discipleship, the right way in light of this passage. Discipleship is increasingly obeying Jesus in all of life. It's increasingly obeying Jesus in all of life. Jesus says, baptizing them. That's the first thing you do when you become a Christian. It's the rite of entrance. You're in now. Because this symbolic baptism. You're in, entrance. But now what? Teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. What's everything? Well, Jesus spent 3 years with his disciples, almost constantly with them, all of the time. For 3 years. They heard him minister and teach to all sorts of crowds, all different audiences, interact with all kinds of people. For 3 years, almost every day they were together. And now Jesus says, go and teach others everything I've commanded you. It's increasingly following Jesus in all of life. That's what discipleship is. Now here's the thing, okay? This is really important. If that's what discipleship is for us, for me, if it's increasingly obeying Jesus in all of life for myself, then what does that mean as I go and try to help someone else to also be discipled? As I go to make disciples, as I go to help somebody else grow in their faith, what does that mean as I help them? Well, it means that I can't just stick them in a classroom. It means I can't just have a Bible study with them, that I can't just invite them out to coffee. Those are important tools. Those are all part of the process. That's good. But what does it mean as I seek to help somebody be discipled? What does it mean? It means I have to disciple them in all of life. All of life, right? Our lives have to overlap. They have to be together. They have to see us living out all of life together. For me, as I think of my mentors and those who have built into me over the years, one particular story stands out. When I was a junior in college, there's a family that lived in our college town that was spending a lot of time and energy investing in college students. And they invited me and a couple other college guys over to their house for dinner one night. And so we went over there for dinner, and they had 3 young children at the time. And so we shared dinner to them. It was a great time. And kind of after dinner was over, we all just kind of a mixture of like cleaning up and interacting with their kids, that kind of thing. And then it was bedtime for their youngest daughter, who was 3 years old then. And the dad started to kind of go back to her bedroom to tuck her in. And he called, like us 3 college guys, like called us over. He's like, hey guys, come back to her room with me as I tuck her in. And so we walk back, and sort of us like 3 college dudes kind of like awkwardly like walk into this bedroom of this 3-year-old little girl, and we go in, and he turns on her nightlight, and he kind of kneels down next to her bed, and he invites all of us to kind of kneel down next to him, and then he prays for her, and we pray with him, and then we get up and we walk out of the room and close our door. And I remember at the time just kind of thinking, okay, like, it's a little awkward, this is like a pretty intimate part of your life to invite us into. But now looking back, I go, oh my gosh, like, that's discipleship, right? That's discipleship. That level of inviting people in, that level of modeling, of showing people what it looks like. And you'd better believe now that me, years later, as I now have my own son, that as I think about how I tuck him in, well, he doesn't really sleep very much. I try to, anyway, that's another point. But at the point, as I kind of interact with my son, and as we sit around the dinner table, and as I kind of lead him through a bedtime routine, where am I getting that from? From them, right? From what I saw modeled for me in them. That is making disciples in all of life. Not just a little bit of content or information here and there, okay? So that's this idea of making disciples in all of life. Now, we still need kind of a little bit more concrete kind of takeaway here, and how can we do this, right? How can all of us hop on board with this idea of all of life? And so here's just kind of a method that I want to talk about with you, just 3 requirements, kind of 3 requirements as we seek to make disciples. And it really goes with our 3 practices of a disciple that we talk about here at Prairie Lakes, which is learn, include, bless, okay? Here's the first thing. Knowledge is required. If you want to make disciples, yes, it's true. There is some knowledge that is required. We said that Christianity is not just knowledge. Disciples is not only knowledge, but as a part of it. It's an important part of it. You need to know the basics. You need to know the basics of the Christian faith, kind of how to study the Bible a little bit, how to help somebody else do those things. Yep, knowledge is a part of it. So knowledge is required. We learn together. Another thing that we do is relationship is required. Relationship is required. You can't disciple somebody who you don't really know and doesn't know you and doesn't have access to your life. And guys, there's good news and bad news about this relationship aspect for us. Good news and bad news. The good news is that it's like pretty simple. Like all of us, we can all just kind of relate with people and invite them, include them in our lives. That's a pretty easy thing to do. That's the good news. The bad news is that a lot of us are really busy. And we're spread out into like 5 or 6 different communities. We got church, extracurriculars, sports, my kids' school, my work, right, my neighborhood, like all these different communities. Like, oh my goodness, how do I relate with all these people? Some of us, we just need to simplify a little bit. We need to cut some things out. We need to quit some things, We need to zero in on some relationships, some key relationships. I just sat with my college students a couple weeks ago as we begin a new semester together with my leadership team. I said, guys, if you want to have an impact in the life of a person, of another college student this semester, then one of the first things that you need to do is to make room in your life to be in relationship with that person. You need to have room. You need to have space. You're not going to impact somebody if you don't have any room or space in your life for them to be with you in. And it's true. It's just, and I mean, there's a lot of things we already do we can invite people into, right? We all eat 3 meals a day. Invite somebody to eat a meal with you. You go to work, be intentional with somebody at work. You come to church, disciple somebody at church, right? There's ways that we can do this more efficiently, but at the end of the day, there's no way around it. Disciple making is time making. Disciple making is time making. It simply is. It takes time to have relationships. But there's no other way to make disciples than to do it relationally. And I've heard several people say over the years, I don't remember when I heard it for the first time, but I've heard several people say that the best tool that you have for making disciples is your kitchen table. The best tool you have for making disciples is your kitchen table, just inviting people into your life and relating with them there. So relationship is required. And then lastly, demonstration is required. Demonstration. You've got to welcome, one of the reasons that we include people, that we welcome them into our lives is so that they can see us, see how we bless others, see how we show God's love to others with no strings attached. And so we want them to be able to see that. They need access to our lives so that we can show them what it means to follow Jesus in all of life. Okay, so bless, demonstration required. Okay, so Jesus said, go make disciples, baptizing them, teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And what this means for us is that we need to make disciples in all of life. Maybe as you're kind of thinking about that and what that could look like for you, you feel a little bit of the weight of like the cost of that. It's true, if you want to do this, if you really want to invest in Little Iowa, if you want to make a difference in people's lives, there is a cost. There's a cost that comes with that. There's a cost of time. There's a cost of convenience. There's a cost of money, as you invite people in and kind of feed people and have people in your home and all that. Yeah. There are costs associated with that. It's true. But as you consider the cost, let us be quick to remember the example of Jesus in all of this. Can we be thankful together that Jesus, when he came to being with us, he didn't just send us an encouraging email once. He didn't just invite us out to coffee a couple of times. He didn't just have pass some information or some content to us. No, not at all. What did Jesus do? He gave us all of himself. He gave us all of himself. In fact, he laid down his life to be with us. And so friends, as we think about our Little Iowa together, as we think about those who you are going to be the only picture of Jesus that they ever have, may we be quick to give all of ourselves to reaching them and to helping them take steps forward in their walk with God. That is what we want to have tunnel vision on. That's what we want to be focused in on together in this next season as a church, is putting an arm around all of us, putting an arm around someone in our Little Iowa and helping to disciple them, helping them to obey Jesus in all of life. Let's close in prayer together. God, I ask that you would give all of us a heart, a passion, God, a burden for those people in our Little Iowas who don't know you, who are far from you. And God, that you would give us all a healthy sense of personal responsibility, God, for their spiritual well-being, knowing that it's because of Jesus' authority, not because of our abilities, that we can begin to help them take steps forward. But God, give us that burden. And Lord, help us, equip us to be able to go forward from here and to follow your example of giving everything that we are in order to help others to take steps towards you. We pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.